Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Awaken the World. Tonight we present the video nobody wants to watch, but everyone who wishes to awaken should. And we will see who comes on this morning. It's going to be an interesting, or this evening actually. It's going to be an interesting video. Hello Cindy, nice to see you. Yeah, I don't see Jackie here yet. Strange, unless she hasn't shown up on my chat yet. And Kelly's actually outside with one of our dear friends, Sharon. She's a member of our group as well. And they're outside having a visit by the pond. So this is a really interesting video. And, you know, as I said in the disclaimer, and as I've tried to warn people a few times, this video is not for the faint of heart. We are going to, begin to move people slowly, those who are ready for it, those who are open enough to it, those whose consciousness is prepared for it, through one of the most difficult of the final rabbit holes you must pass through in order to fully realize a fully awakened consciousness in this lifetime. Okay, to be equivalent of what we would say would be a fully enlightened being. So someone who's actually achieved full enlightenment within this lifetime. And, despite what people would say about it, it is not some process where you turn into this being of light and flutter away onto a cloud with shimmery wings. That's not how it works. That's not what enlightenment is about. As Buddha said, before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. Nothing on the outside fundamentally changes. And unfortunately, ego, in its never-ending quest to keep itself in control, will come up with all sorts of fantasies as to what enlightenment means, including all sorts of superpowers. And it looks upon this, and honestly, that's spiritual ego. Enlightenment evolves out of a deep and profound love and desire to meet God face to face. Hello, Jennifer. Nice to see you. So Jennifer's here, Cindy's here, Kelly and Sharon are outside or inside or sneaking around the house somewhere. And others are probably watching in the background. And that's great. And as I said, for anyone who's just coming on, this video is going to be a little more serious of a video. It's about passing through one of the most difficult rabbit holes, one of the most difficult passages that you have to transverse. And it opens up another entire level of consciousness for you. And then you will continue your journey from that point. Hey, Danion's on. Way to go, boy child. Nice to see you. Everyone, Danion is my stepson. Although to me, I just think of him as my kid. I couldn't think of him any other way. He's actually a really good kid. He's got a really good heart. Sometimes I want to strangle him, but that's what I keep the extra clones around for. That way I can kill my child and not go to jail for it, because there's a new one waiting in the morning. No, he is a great kid. He really is. And hopefully this will benefit him as well. So we're going to begin with this. And this is what this is all about. Is moving beyond thought. Is moving past the point where our thoughts are at the forefront of our being. And this is the main, actually it is the only cause of what we would consider to be human troubles. And, I know everyone has seen this in others, including Danion. As a matter of fact, he had mentioned to me a short time ago that he, had to say to one of his friends, essentially, to stop living in the past, to let that go. And that was a really great thing to hear from him. And as with everything, we always find it easier to see it in others. And we have to learn to see it in ourselves first and foremost. We have to be willing to listen to the advice that we dispense to others, because indeed, we are dispensing that advice to ourselves. In truth, when we speak to another, it is the Creator speaking to the Creator. God is interacting with God, and you have a choice as to what sort of creative being you want to portray. I know my portrayals are not always up to snuff. And I'm sure when we look at each other, we can see the same. Hello, Anna. 2 a.m. Well, thank you. That means a lot, and it's wonderful to see you here. And we're going to talk about a number of things that you will find helpful here as well. What thought means, okay? And here's the problem. As soon as you have a thought, and this is going to be very difficult to grasp, and the reason being is in the relative universe, everything is dichotomy. Everything is a pair. And what we're trying to do is unpair a pair using the language of pairs that does not apply to the unpairing, but we have no choice. This is the limited state that our physical spoken word is in. And we so often forget that. We so often cease to be aware of that. What thought means in reality is that your thought is the only thing creating reality. And when we talk about reality, what we're talking about, of course, is the only reality that really matters in reality. And that is your perception of it. Because your perception of it is guiding it. Your perception of it is controlling your reality. And if your perceptions are misguided, or your perceptions are based on, whoa, almost spilled my water. Forgot the waving of the hands. I do a lot of that. If your perceptions are based on these thoughts without incredibly close scrutiny, what happens is we lead ourselves down garden paths, and we cease to be on a spiritual path. Well, we're never off the spiritual path. What happens is we think we're blissfully going along consciously aware, when in fact we are still asleep, and we have simply slipped into another level of dream. The illusion of Maya, this physical illusion, has many, many levels to it. Some levels will appear very much to be a so-called awakened level. But at a close, deeper scrutiny, you will see that it is not awakening at all. It is, in fact, a trading of one form of identification with self for another. Now, a few people are going to say to me, well, why would you want to do this video and perhaps confuse people and perhaps make some people angry? And you know what? As the same with everything, I don't own that. That will be a product of your own egoic state. A product of your own thoughts, a product of your own perceptions. I am here out of infinite love and compassion for every part of that which I am, which includes all of you. And it is my desire to see every one of you engage in a true awakening of being, to end that perceived suffering that caused you to seek something more to begin with. And that's what this is really all about. So keep that in your heart when you find you want to take a baseball bat to me. And I'm glad it's not confusing for you, Jennifer. If you find it confusing, give the video a watch and then go back to your meditation. If this is starting to make sense with you, stick with it. It can and will open you to a new level of consciousness. Now, unbinding from the limited mind, and this is where things begin to get a little dicey in the way we have to explain it, okay? Because there is really no way to say this. And again, understand, the words are struggling to simply point towards the truth I am speaking of. This truth must be felt intrinsically in your being beyond that level of thought. So perhaps close your eyes or steady your being if you must gaze at me looking at you, although I can't see you. and listen deeply to this on another level of being. You are within, composed of, generated by, sustained in the mind of God. Literally in the mind of that sea of consciousness. Now, as a droplet in that sea of consciousness, you have your own sense of mind. And that sense of mind is also an offshoot from the sea of consciousness, inseparable from the sea of consciousness. But in your opinion, as a drop, not understanding that you are the sea of consciousness, you think that you own that mind. And yet, you cannot help but watch as thoughts, as emanations from that mind, as energetic emanations from that individualized mind of that sea of consciousness are manifested into existence, and you become aware of them. And you call them your own. Big mistake. Have you ever paid really close attention what happens when you start speaking? Do you think that in the back of my head, outside of the range of your hearing and what you can see is going on, that there is a voice inside of my head speaking the thoughts and thinking about what I want to say as the words are rolling out of my tongue at speed? Have you ever wondered, when you speak to another, who is actually doing the talking? Because if you pay close attention, you're going to find out that you're not actually planning to say what you're going to say. It is just happening. Are people grabbing this so far? Feel free to comment. If it's making a little sense to you, let me know. If it's raising a question, ask the question. That's what we're here for. That's what I am here for. Unbinding from limited mind is the understanding that your mind is having experiences. Your mind is not your mind. It doesn't belong to you. Good. I'm glad that some of you are with me so far. I really am, because I want to take you to an entirely new place of being. That is my fervent wish for you. And I know whatever happens, it's okay, but we are here to guide and to grow each other, and we all need to hear this sort of thing. Okay? Unbinding from limited mind is letting go of the concept that what you think about is yours, because it's not. You know, people tend to stay on the surface of that orange. I'm asking you to tear that peel off and dive down deep into where it's really sweet and juicy. Everything that comes up in your head is an expression of the mind of God. It is not your mind. It is an expression of the mind of God, colored by all the previous experiences gathered up in that memory bank we would call me, that I would call I. There's none of it that's you in it. And furthermore, it happens to function totally autonomously of whatever you may happen to think about it. Watch. The thoughts come and go all by themselves. Now, what does this have to do with the being you are, and how do you understand the relationship between the two of them, okay? And here's the trick. This is where things are going to get even dicier still, and I hope you guys can hold on to this. I pray in my heart that you can. You truly are everywhere in this universe simultaneously. You just happen to be paying attention to what is happening with this one particular manifestation that you perceive yourself to be. But it's not. The being that you are will operate totally autonomously. Everyone's experienced this. Have you ever not driven to work only to realize that you have no recollection of the drive? That it was totally automatic? And a little voice goes through your head and say, you know, maybe I'm lucky to be alive because I don't even remember stopping for traffic lights. I wasn't there. Somebody else was driving the car. Had to be. I have no conscious memory of it. We've all had these experiences, and these experiences are all little hints, little light bulbs that we can look at that remind us that that which is having the experience is having that experience already. Our conscious control comes into how we are choosing to react to the experience and how we are choosing to pay attention and react to the thoughts that arise as a natural part of life itself. You see, life is expressing itself on every single level. It is not just expressing itself on a molecular level. It is expressing itself on every level, including levels beyond the physical realm, into the realm of consciousness, because indeed the physical realm is the remnant, is the leftover manifestation, is the byproduct of that conscious evolution, the byproduct of those never-ending spewing thoughts. The unfettered mind, that mind of God, that sea of consciousness, is surrounding us right now. We are swimming in it. We are it. The line between that little mind point of view, that limited point of view, and the unfettered mind does not exist. Hello, Jackie. Nice to see you too. That line is a figment of your imagination. It does not exist between you and the all that which you are. What gets in the way are the concepts and thoughts. There's only one way through that, and it is intense meditation. You know, it is not uncommon for me to sit and meditate for up to 3 hours. And I don't say that from an egoic point of view. I say that as an indication of the level of commitment you're going to need to work with your being to quiet that mind. Existing in a state where you spend at least 80% of your day with interior silence, true silence, okay, you're going to find out one thing. That the egoic sense of self that talks about everything is literally ad-libbing your existence, and it is not necessary. You intrinsically know everything that you need to accomplish and do in this existence. It does not take thought. And letting go of thought is your one and only true task. Thought will never disappear. Let us be clear about that. But what will happen is it will become the never-ending sound of life expressing itself within your mind. It will become like a waterfall in the background. It will become like a beautiful cascading waterfall. And you will not cling to individual thoughts, and you will begin to act naturally and freely. And this is the state of being I want all of you to come to. This is where we get into the real problem with people. Concepts are not truth. And this is the one that really sucks for a lot of people. And we're going to delve into some of these. And the reason we're going to is to teach you how to pull your own thoughts apart and look at them for the validity or invalidity of them. And it is all about mind. You know, as I've said before, people would have this wonderful, Jackie. If you're close to being there, it means it's only a little tiny step away. And it is, for all of us, just a little step away. You can do this. You can walk through this door. And once you do, that mind becomes so much quieter. Concepts are not truth. Thoughts are ways of trying, it's the same as words, to label that which cannot be honestly defined. And there's a bunch of concepts that we cling to that when we look at them deeply, they either make no sense or they're simply untrue, and they actually do not serve us. What they do is they serve as the structural framework for spiritual ego, which is just a new identity of self. A new overlay, a new egoic sense of I, based on spiritual principles instead of based on sleeping principles, but no different underneath that. The egoic structure is still intact. It is still the same structure, and it is that which we want to take the hammer to. So we're going to talk about a number of false concepts, and this is where things are going to begin to bite a little bit, okay? I've heard a lot of people in the past and recently talk about, well, I am unconditional love. Well, unconditional love is all there is. Have you ever thought about that? The minute you are thinking, you have placed, yes, exactly, release of the fluff. The minute you have formed a thought about it, you have fallen into a lie. You've fallen into a concept. You've fallen into a belief. And I know that's hard to bite onto, but understand this. There is nothing that we can talk about that we are speaking the truth about. We are speaking in pointers. We are speaking in the general direction of. Never once can anyone on this planet proclaim to speak truth. Because truth is inevitable. Truth exists beyond the spoken word. Language itself cannot express that which is ever evolving, ever changing, ever growing. It simply cannot. And thoughts are language. Thoughts are a huge part of that. The concept of unconditional love. In order to have unconditional love, you would have to be completely beyond thought to start with. Because if there is a thought in your head, you are now in condition. And what is love? Again, the same thing applies. As soon as we begin to think about love, as soon as we begin to speak about love, we've lost love. We are talking about, and this is the thing, it is difficult to fit in the world in which you live, and it does hold on. Part of us looks back through that wormhole, always looks back through that rabbit hole, because it's an awakening. It is a movement away from that false egoic sense of self, a movement to a place of absolute stillness of being. Yeah, and that's what happens. You can feel the shift, and the shift is based on your vibrational state, of course, Jackie. When you are in that right vibrational state, and this is what I kind of allude to for people to understand. You know when you spin a top, if the top is spinning just right, boy, does it feel good. You could just spin there forever and the energy's all flowing and everything's great. But something will come along and it'll push that little top and it'll begin to wobble. And we'll have a little energetic wobble ourselves, and we'll fall in and out of these higher states of consciousness. And when we talk about raising consciousness, I want to delineate in picture form how it actually works, because this is kind of important. So here's your consciousness today. And, and of course, I'm making do with what's around my desk, okay? So, and here's the conscious level that you're heading to. So you don't do this. You don't crawl from here, do, and now you're here. What you do is you wave. And the waves begin to get larger. And the waves begin to flow into this new level of consciousness. So you're up in this new level of consciousness, and crap, fell back down to the old one. And then you're back up in here again, and then back down to the old one. And that is what happens for so many people. And the reason it happens is mind. The reason it happens is the clinging to the false concepts. Now, where does this come up in our relationships? This is the big one. We all have concepts of what we think we want. We all have thought processes and words to describe what we feel will make us happy. If you haven't figured it out yet, none of those words, none of those things we thought would make us happy actually make us happy for any length of time. It is not those things. It is something underneath it. Jackie asked, does it have to happen? Yeah, it does. From an egoic sense, okay, your ego is the remnant. And it is always playing catch up to your conscious awakening. Always playing catch up to that. It's like taking the ego into a new environment. You're literally dragging that sense of I into a new universe. And even though that sense of I feels a little larger and a little less afraid, there's still going to be elements in it of fear and guilt and elements of clinging to your own concepts. And here's where this comes in. And how do you stop it from happening? The only way to stop it from happening is to get to that place of silence in your head. And we're going to talk more about that. So in relationships, this is what we do. We say, we have an expectation of what we think we want. And when we are not receiving that from another person, we look at the other person as being at fault for it. And we say to them, well, I've told you what I want. I've told you what I need. And of course, they're not needs. Because basically, food, clothing, and shelter, and a lot of people even do without that. And don't worry, Jackie, we're going to come back to this, for sure. You tell someone else what you want, and then you say to them, well, you're not giving me what I want. The first question you need to address to yourself is the understanding that your idea that someone else is going to give you something that you want is a confused idea to start with. Nobody can give you anything. It's impossible. I don't care whether they hand you a diamond ring or whether they claim to hand you the world or pretend that they're giving you, and maybe you get sucked up in it. Maybe you believe that that person is giving you security. No such thing exists. Think about it deeply. It is impossible to be given anything. Everything is processed by and through mind, and it is the state and condition of your mind in every moment of your conscious awakening day that matters the most. It is that which leads you to that path where you will eventually no longer do this. But there is a joy and there is a reason for that waving in and out of higher levels of consciousness, okay? When we wave back down into that lower level of consciousness again, when we fall partially back asleep, in retrospection, we begin to see those things which we have not let go in our being. And I've gone through this personally, on a personal level, face to face with a number of group members who are having relationship troubles of one sort or another. And it all comes down to the same thing. The false concepts of, you make me feel a certain way, and I'm sorry, but you own every feeling you choose to have. Understand what I just said. You own every feeling you choose to have. You know, I had a conversation with our friend and Kelly before we started the video tonight, and I said to our friend, I said, you know, I kind of had to take one of these 2x4s I was working with and beat Kelly over the head with it last night in regards to what other people think. And Sharon said, well, what do you mean? She looks pretty intact. And I said, well, it's figurative. But here's the deal. You have no control over what anyone else will think or say or do. And you don't have a right to. It's called free will, and it belongs to that sea of consciousness, and therefore it belongs to everybody. Is it an intrinsic right of your being? Similarly, everyone else has that right around you. If you want to start living a highly conscious life and you want to restore your power to yourself, take full responsibility for every aspect of your being. Drop the false ideas that you are, for one, unconditional love. You are not. You are determining what love represents to you and trying your best to live that. But it is, at best, a concept. This isn't a blame game. This isn't a right or wrong game. This is moving past one of the largest pitfalls that awakening beings will face. And that is the pitfall of falling in to continuing a life of thought. You know, during that discussion we had prior, I was saying, have you ever meditated? It was about the Hue meditation we did. Someone had done the meditation in the morning, the next morning on a replay. And I had said to Sharon, I said, do you ever notice that when you're fully relaxed in that meditative state, that there is a stillness of being that feels totally natural? She said, yeah. And I said, that is the state of being that you are meant to live your entire life in. That internal quietude, that internal sense of stillness is where it all comes from. All the thoughts that we put out in regards to what's happening, into the behavior we see in others, whether it's a roommate or our mate or a boyfriend or girlfriend, gay lover, dog, cat, it doesn't matter. Part of being completely transparent, completely honest with oneself, is to see that everything that you think you want is not external to you. You're not looking for the thing. You're not even looking for someone to hold you. And I know that's hard to bite onto, okay? But please, just follow along with me for a minute. The idea that we would like to feel physical affection from someone else is a basic lack of the feeling of the affection of that sea of consciousness as a regular occurrence in every moment of your day. And then you go outside of yourself. And yes, the egoic mind will very easily make up a great reason why that is the way it should be. You know, I'm going to give you another example which may help set what happens when we let our perceptions get away from us. You know, we had a friend of ours over, another friend, and she was sitting there and saying, no man will appreciate the pain a woman goes through when their child is not around them and they can feel that connection still within them. And I can tell right away, there's a lot of women out there who are nodding their head and saying, yeah. I understand that pain. I understand that ache. And I said to her, I said, you know, I remember many, many past lives that my higher self has taken part of. And I remember many lives of being feminine and being pregnant. And I know that feeling of which you speak. And I've never found that feeling to be an ache. I've always found that feeling to be a gift from that creative sea of consciousness as that which brings life into being in this human realm. The gift is a never-ending cord of connection, no matter how much time and space separate mother and son or mother and daughter. There is a connection there that can be felt. No matter where they are in this universe, it can be felt by the mother. I saw her eyes go wide for a second. And I realized that she had understood that her perception that that was a bad thing, that that was an ache, that it caused pain, was all about her perceptions. And this is what we do with life. It is all about your perceptions. Nobody can make you feel anything, good or bad. You're responding to an external stimulus. And the response is pretty much automatic. It's part of life itself to keep life going. Right? You're feeling like snuggling up with someone and you snuggle up with them, and the next thing you know, you're feeling like you're doing a little more than snuggling up. And pretty soon you're snuggling up between you and the growing belly that contains the baby. And life continues. The opportunity for conscious growth and awareness continues. The opportunity for other beings to come into existence continues on this material plane. But none of it is made by anybody. It is all what goes on within that mind of yours. That mind is that same all-powerful mind of the Creator. There is no line. We're talking about concepts. And if you can move past that line that separates what you think is your limited sense of self and understand that that line doesn't actually exist to start with, you're going to move into a whole new world, and it'll happen over the course of the next few days. You're going to find this. The idea that I am this or I am that, this needs some clarification for people. And it really does, because that is a very powerful statement. But the statement ends with I am. And if you go back to my I am video, you will see that I'm quite clear about that. The statement ends with I am. Whatever you choose after that statement becomes a one-time expression of your being. One time. It can never be expressed the same way again. But it is not your being. So when you say, I am in pain, it is not the being that is in pain. It is a mind concept of pain, and intoning that pain, I aming that pain, two of the most powerful creative words that we will ever speak. And that's why it was left at I am. Because whatever you're going to add after that is going to create. A lot of those creations will come really fast. Especially with ones where we are identifying within the body. I am lonely. The universe will give you an abundance of loneliness. Why? To get you to understand that you're never alone. It is a difficult concept to understand in a lot of ways, and that's because we're trying to move beyond mind, and we this is what it comes down to. It comes down to experience versus knowledge, okay? Buddha realized the same thing that Christ and every other awakened being has realized, and that is, it is what you think about something that determines your personal outcome. Well, you're lucky, Jackie, if people are only looking at you sideways. For me, it's mostly their eyes glaze over and they turn around and run the other direction as fast as they can. Some of them even screaming as they go. As long as you're existing within the realm of thought, your life is a concept. Your spirituality is a concept. It is an idea. It is a construct of your mind. And I want to take you beyond that. And do not make the mistake of thinking that everything that you have worked on and accomplished and read and done to this date has not been immensely valuable, because it has been. But it's the same way as getting ready to jump out of the nest. You have to do all the pre-work. Now, I want to push you out. I want to push you over that cliff. I want you to fall into that chasm, into the abyss, into the darkness. And I want you to fall and fall and fall until the last bit of that false sense of I is ripped from your being. And what is left is the glorious being that you truly are. And that being lives and exists beyond thought. You know, really, we are a receiver, just like a radio receiver. Who is speaking? Not me. The higher consciousness that is manifesting this, which would be called Garhen, is doing the speaking. I am simply interpreting through the filter of my receiver. And as long as the receiver has a trace of thoughts and concepts left in it, there is always going to be a distortion in the translation. Some of those distortions end up getting people murdered. Some of those distortions end up with us hating other people. But every single communication that starts in the core of your being starts from that place of love. But it doesn't, because love is a word. It starts from that place beyond the words. All our experience to date colors those words, determines what words are going to be used from what started beyond words. How do you get it to come out clearly? Without the words in the way. Now, a lot of you would say, well, wait a minute. If I'm not using words, how do I communicate? And you know, I'm not talking about not using words, but what I'm talking about is always keeping in mind what words are. You know, we will go to war, we will fight with each other, we will argue, we will hiss and spit and destroy relationships all over definitions. All over words. Of course, you can share what you receive. Absolutely. But take care in understanding that in the conceptualization of what you receive, you are only pointing the person in the direction. And really, it comes down to a choice. We can spend our entire lives reading books that make us feel good and doing practices that make us feel good, or we can go for that grail. And it's okay. Whatever you're comfortable with. The grail is a solitary journey, and the reason it's a solitary journey is it has to happen within your being. And then, yes, it can be shared in the same way that I strive to share with you today my experiences. that which I have come to know directly, experientially. I take that and then I try as best as possible to delineate that in such a way that, not so you will absorb it at a mental level, although of course this is part of the process, but eventually it will percolate down deeper into your being. And it will trigger rememberings in you. You see, that's really what we're doing with each other, is we're saying, come on, remember what you are. Remember what you are. And we're saying it in so many different ways to each other. Remember what you are. Remember what you are. But you'll notice that the highest thoughts, the highest words, exactly, you're never able to express it. Because the true expressing of it is beyond words to express it. You know, I think the closest thing that expresses it is the look that we give a young, playful child. When we hear laughter and walk around the corner and see innocence playing, there's something about that, and that causes a look and a smile to come onto our face, and that is the closest thing that I could think of that actually speaks to reality. It goes far more than the words do. You know, I struggle with these words all the time. I struggle to explain this in ways that can be, absorbed in some way. And sooner or later, we're going to cover off these other topics, and this is part of it. And again, here's another spiritual ego trap, and it's called the near-death experience. And I have seen this time and time and time again. And you'll notice I will never ever speak this way, because I understand that the near-death experience, because it's a near-death experience, very much is still couched in ego. It needs to be. That is the frame of reference that the person is at in the interpretation that they are capable of. There is no one near-death experiences, my own included, that are the right near-death experience or the wrong near-death experience. Near-death experience is colored by concept. Why? Because you still have an ego going on. You still have a sense of I. Your experiences, your filters will determine what you filter out of that experience. You cannot look to another's experience and proclaim that their experience could not have been in that way, because you did not have that experience. Experiences are one of a kind. That sea of consciousness does not waste its time by repeating the same experience. Every experience is unique. Every point of view is unique. None of them matter. Man, that's hard to pick up. How do you know if you've had an NDE? The hospital tells you died, and they tell you how long you were clinically dead for, and then you come back. In my case, 8 minutes and then 11 minutes the second time. And there are no silly questions, only silly answers. And I specialize in silly answers. Putting the books down. You know, the books are wonderful. I go into the books all the time. But the books engage at a mind level. And what we're really doing is we're trying to train that mind back into the arrow that we're going to shoot into the heavens to draw down that consciousness. And we are looking to make that arrow one-pointed. The books help us do that. The videos help us do that. The Sangha or community help us do that. The Dharma or the Word helps us do that. But it only helps. The actual connection belongs to us in that state of grace that begins with an empty cup. an empty mind, and letting go of all our concepts is the first thing we must do. Living it versus talking about it. And this is what comes down to, people were saying, well, how do you gauge where you are at spiritually? The degree to which you live it versus talk about it. And again, we're not talking about judgment. What I'm saying to people is sit and honestly look at your life. This is not a school, but you have been schooled. Your entire life you've been schooled. You've been brainwashed. You've been mind messed with. You've been taught to accept and agree to certain things that you've been told are facts. And how much time do we actually look at that? How much time do we spend looking at what is actually going on within that mind, looking at those repetitive patterns and determining those we must change? It is very much like that, Cindy. You have an experience that speaks at a higher level to your being, and there are simply no words which will do. It's like saying, it's like having one of those experiences and you wake up from it and you try to talk about it, but anything you're saying is like, no, that's not right. That's not it. That's not. Why? Because it's beyond that. The thinking mind will never, ever, ever be able to grasp in its entirety that sea of consciousness because it will conceptualize it. Jackie says, how do you tell or teach someone to be truthful with themselves? Well, this is a tough one because I still struggle with Kelly. And I have to tell you, Kelly is a kind-hearted, good-souled, doesn't want to hurt a single person in the world, would rather die than lie person. And yet she lies to herself all the time. There is one way you can teach someone to be truthful with themselves. And it won't work if they're not willing to face themselves. And this is the way. Whatever you're thinking, if it's making you feel bad, you're lying. If it's making you feel good, it may be the truth. Start with that. That is the first place that we must address with ourselves when it comes to reining in the mind, is understanding that our body has been gifted to us as an alarm system to let us know when our minds are straying off truth and straying down a false path. And it happens because that dissonant vibration causes you to feel bad in some way. I am still 4 years later teaching Kelly to be truthful with herself. It takes deep introspection with one's own being. The willingness to expose everything, to become transparent. And for a lot of people, it's really frightening. But as I say over and over again, the power that comes out of that is unbelievable. It truly is. When you finally allow yourself to be 100% authentic in your relationships with others especially. You see, whatever primordial relationship you're in or not in is very much speaking to you about where you are at consciously, not where the other person is at. Everything is about you. All of it. And if you're not looking at it from that point of view, in everything, you cannot be truthful with yourself. So teach them to understand that there is no truth in the idea that anybody can make you feel, do, or act a certain way. Those are your choices. That is the first step in truthfulness. Spiritual ego, and this is the biggest trap of all, of course, and this is the trap that happens. You will begin to awaken, you will begin to follow a spiritual path, and you will literally fall asleep in the middle of that path. Just like the rabbit under the tree. And the reason being is that egoic sense of self has an amazing, adaptable survival instinct. It's designed that way. You have to work with it until the fear disappears, and the work happens through deep introspection and even deeper meditation. Thought, word, and deed, and this is the best guide to where you're at. If you are thinking one way and speaking a different way and acting out even another different way yet, there is a term for that, and it's called a hypocrite. And again, don't take it personally. I've been a hypocrite at least a few times today. Being honest with yourself is seeing it, is looking at it, not judging it, and understanding what it is in you that is continuing that behavior and excising that behavior from your being. And there's only two paths. The one path is constantly working with the mind. I invite you to do that on a regular basis, but don't make it the center. Don't make it the focus. Make the focus meditation. I can't make this clearer. If you were to spend a couple hours throughout the day just taking mindful breaths without thought, just following that breath, that will go so much further to truly awakening your being to the level that you are looking for. And I know because everyone is looking for it. You know, we lost that sense of connectivity with our Creator in our childhood when the beginning of that sense of I began to form. This sense of separation began to form. But we all subconsciously remember it. And every reaching out to a lover we don't feel is attentive enough, to a husband or a wife that isn't giving us enough of what we want sexually, emotionally, whatever, they don't own that. It's not their fault. There is no fault. It's you. And it's your responsibility. Why? Because in the back of your being, you're craving that reconnection with the higher source. And you will find no matter who you connect with, it will never replace that as long as you are in need of it. As long as you're in need of it, you're queering it. This is the hardest thing for people to accept. As long as you cling to anything, you have yet to experience freedom. And trust me, let it go. Let it all go. Let it all go. 100%. And you will find heaped upon you not the things you thought you want, but the things that you truly desire, and they will not be things. They will come in the sense of being and the peace of being that you will radiate out to the rest of the world. Every relationship is a living example of our desire to reunite with that sea of consciousness. How do you address the sea of consciousness in another? How do you find the sea of consciousness within yourself? Give up all judgment. Give up thought. I've done experiments, okay? I can remain totally thought-free roughly 80% of the day. I can do anything that I could do while thinking about it without thinking about it. And guess what? It's a lot easier. Trust me on this one. Look into the mirror this evening and commit just to say to yourself the one thing you've always wanted to tell yourself from your deepest being. Don't think about it. Just commit to say it. Step up to that mirror and start talking. You move that mind out of the way for even a brief second, and what comes out of you will be the interpretation of your higher being. Filtered through what? Filtered through mind. The more noise in the mind, the more static in the channel. The more static in the channel, the more misinterpretation in the final picture. I want to remove that static for you. I want that picture to become clearer. And it becomes clearer when you drop all concepts. Drop should and should not. Drop it all. Allow what naturally comes into your attention every day to be dealt with in a natural way. Without the need for overthinking, without the need for analyzing, without the need for judging. Simply allow it to be. Experiment. Allow the other person to be. Instead of judging the other person, instead of looking at the other person in a relationship and saying, well, you're not the way I want you to be. Look at them and say, you're clearly exactly the way you choose to be. And stop kidding yourself and make decisions for yourself based on what it is that you wish. But be careful what you wish for. It takes real work. It takes so much more than the concept of believing that we are a certain thing. Because that which we are cannot be described. It can only be experienced. And you will get glimpses of that experience. What I want is you to have that experience all the time. Jackie says it right. Eye to eye with self is a great connection. You voice what needs to be voiced from that higher place. There is no thinking about it. It simply flows out in the same way these videos flow out of myself. That there is no speech planning. You know, I create storyboards to gather some attention and to make sure that I address every issue. But aside from those words on the screen, what comes out is a response to those words. And it does not come from my conscious mind. Go ahead and go have a talk with your neighbor and see if you're the one who's actually doing the talking. Understand that the mind doesn't belong to you. It never did. You are that silence. You are that behind the mind. You are that which hears it. You are that which has no voice. Remember that. In order to increase the opportunity for people to achieve this, the Help Awaken channel is going to switch into, as I've said before last week, twice weekly meditations. And yes, absolutely, it is a pure flow. And it is a wonderful feeling. And feeling is the closest thing we can come. But as soon as you try to put anything on it, to be honest, you've lost it. You lose it completely. You've turned a reality into a conception. And in that conception, it disappears. It really does. Why do we need that up and down, that in and out? You don't want to dispel that. The reason being is it's always showing you where there's more to grow. It's always showing you where there's a higher peak yet to come. That is our evolutionary past, or our evolutionary path forward. So this Sunday at, I think I set it for 9:30 because we have lawn mowing to do here at the Strata, and I do apologize for that. We will do a very powerful chakra dhyana, kundalini raising meditation on Sunday. It is going to take about 45 minutes. I am going to make up pronunciations for the chakras for people so they can intone the chakra a little easier. And we are going to do a full chakra dhyana, kundalini raising meditation. It should be absolutely fantastic. And I look forward to seeing you all there. I hope I haven't bruised too many egos tonight. I really, actually, that's not true. I hope I've actually bruised a lot of egos. You know, there's nothing like a good gut punch in the ego to help people, you know, if you wish and if you choose, move a little bit more beyond that ego. Ultimately, this is your journey. I am not your we're all each other's guides. We're all each other's teachers. We're all each other's students. That's for sure. And on your journey, only you can be honest with you. And that's the real trick. You know, as much as we can try and teach someone to be truthful, they have to start from a place of intrinsic love. Jackie, make sure you go plug $1 in the machine for me, hey? If you win, I want a check. Really looking forward to Sunday morning, and you will see that show up in the group. Again, please take this to heart. Understand that as long as there is mine going on, there's a long road yet. And that's okay. It really is. Much love. Namaste. Have a wonderful evening. We'll see you on Sunday. Take care. Good night.